So, Rubric 3 then is about deepening student learning. Um, the task is explain how you elicited and built on student responses, getting them to say stuff, to promote thinking and apply the essential strategy or whatever it is you're trying to do. Now, when we think about what does this mean, well, it means that one, you have to scaffold the lesson and discuss how you did it, right? Make sure that you, like we talked about, in the progression in Rubric 2, make points for opportunities for students to check in basically to see if they're understanding based on your judgment or their own judgment. Make sure that you give students opportunities to do this either in small groups or individual work. Small group is much better because when we look at what the criteria are, it's much better if students are deepening each other's understanding rather than you just walking around and doing everything. Always respond with additional questions to extend learning if mastery is there. So again, you want kind of a learning progression so that, okay, they can do the easy task. Well, what about the next difficult task, and what does it mean for them to understand this, and what's a new situation they might apply it in? Also, in that same sense, constantly challenge student understanding. So when you see that one or all students get something, make sure you have the next steps to make sure that you deepen the understanding. Again, giving one or two situations or examples of a concept isn't the greatest. Give multiple, many, 5, 10, maybe 20, depending on what you have time for and how complex things are. But that's how you build up a schema. That's how you build a real understanding. Things to not do. Don't just give one-word responses. Don't say no, next. If somebody says the wrong answer, explore why it's the wrong answer and how did they derive at that. Is it just because they don't know it, or do you think they might have some kind of misconception that, again, you may have planned for? Don't set your sights too high, though, initially, so that nobody gets anything, because it's hard to deepen and extend student learning when they don't have the basic skills. Now, if we look at the rubric for deepening student learning, the idea is that, right, how does the candidate get students to say this stuff? Level 3 is that candidate elicits student responses, so you get them to say things, to support the use of the strategy or the related skills to comprehend or compose text. Right? One or the other. You may not be able to show everything. Depending on your video clips, this will require some planning to make sure that you can target the overall strategy and those component skills. Again, you will be wanting to relate those back and forth all the time. We'll talk more about that in the next rubric or task. If we look at level 4, right, you get students to explicitly portray, extend, or clarify. So now, in other words, right, you are asking them the right kinds of questions to get them to give you the answers about this is what it would be in this new situation, or this is how it would act if we change this part of it, right? Or this is what it would look like if we were doing this instead of what we just did. Again, it is, in this case also, you are doing this for the strategy and the related skills. So there needs to be that bridge between those two things. You have this complex strategy, you broke it down into component skills, and you are constantly making reference to that strategy when you talk about those individual skills. Level 5 really is, I can see why it's the gold standard. It depending on your students, depending on the classroom, depending on what you're teaching and the level of interest, how well you've done up to now, this might be easy, it might be difficult. But ultimately, you do want students to be working with each other in like their own little learning community, and have enough understanding and wherewithal so they can figure out for themselves how well they understand this and whether or not they can apply this strategy in new contexts, or whether they need some additional insight or structuring or practice. If we look at level 1 and level 2, right, candidate does most of the talking and the students don't say much. So again, you don't just want students to give you these short answers. You want to give them prompts that will require them to really think and describe their thought process, describe their strategies, describe exactly and clarify how they're going to go about doing what you want them to do with the strategy and those little related skills. Level 2 is, they're talking, but again, you're just saying right or wrong. You're not going into the process about why it might be right or why it might be wrong, and giving new examples to clarify those ideas.